Now, I've talked to a lot of his students, a lot of his clients that are, he consults with and for, and that he's taught. They all talk about, as you're heavily invested on the internet, I think, like a lot of us are, and you look and you watch and you listen, and there's a big, almost religious cult around pricing, Exactimate, doing things differently in a certain way. But the one thing that I found about David's classes and what other people were telling me is that they didn't change anything, and all they did was follow the standard, follow David's teachings and protocols, and their invoices grew exponentially. Was that true with you as well?
It was, even being a person that is outside of Exactimate, without going in and changing my pricing structure by implementing the things that David teaches, that the standard says is there, items that reduce your liability, my invoices and return profit went up by following the items that David teaches.
So we were talking before the internet crashed. You had noticed that your invoicing by following the standard had increased, substantially enough to make a difference by just following the way that Dave pointed out the standard of, and then the way to operate within it. Is that fair? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. It allowed us to identify items that we were missing or we were lacking on. And in result of correcting those, it increased our invoice. So we're not the company that's going to go to a job and say, hey, how high can we build this invoice by what we see? We go in and do the work, scope it out, and then that's what our invoice is. And David's class has resulted in an increase in both our gross revenue and our net profit by following the standard as it's written.
So you didn't have to do anything special. You didn't have to yell or scream at anybody. You didn't have to pull out a velvet hammer and hit them over the head. You just did the work and you followed the science and the data. Now, the ATP meter, were you introduced to the ATP meter by David, or was that something you were using previously to help determine category and loss?
It was not introduced to me by David, but how to use it within the day-to-day opportunities within the industry was, and we had a different perspective after leaving David's class of using the ATP meter.
Did you notice that your category changed?
Yes and no. Being a plumbing company, I don't get many category ones. We get
I would imagine
a lot of sewer calls, but it did help us identify more jobs that we would have walked away from and said there was no damage. Mm-hmm. We found a lot of jobs. It's added to our job count by using those practices.
What is when you talk about billing and insurance, and the one thing that I see that it was really big was the way that the client is onboarded with David's philosophy. Did you have an onboard process prior to that you used was different than what you have now?
Well, we did have our own onboarding process. It went along with the theory behind David's, but we were able to go through David's onboarding process, pick out items, and in return, it has shown positive results. Our customers more educated, following the process that David has out there. Our adjusters that are assigned to the projects are more educated, and we've seen a quicker turnaround time on getting paid.